The pen hovered over the document, my son's impatient breath on my neck. "Just sign it, Mom. It's for your own good," he said. What he didn't know was that the brooch on my cardigan had been recording everything for the past 30 minutes, and this wasn't the first time. I'm Betty Williams, 78 years old, a widow for 5 years now. This Victorian house on Maple Street has been my home for over 4 decades. The floorboards creak in places that have become a familiar song to me. The garden out back has roses my late husband James planted when we first moved in. Every corner holds a memory. The dent in the doorframe where we mark David's height each birthday. The windowsill where James would sit and read on rainy afternoons. The kitchen where I taught my granddaughter to bake her first pie. When James and I bought this place, it was in disrepair. Nobody wanted a drafty old Victorian in those days. But we saw its bones, its potential. We spent weekends stripping wallpaper, refinishing hardwood floors, restoring stained glass. James would joke that our marriage vows should have included for better or worse, in renovation and in debt. But we made it ours piece by piece, year by year. My son David moved across the country after college, built a successful life in real estate. He'd call every Sunday, visit twice a year with his wife Amanda and their children. That was our rhythm for years, until James died. The cancer took him quickly, too quickly for proper goodbyes, for closure. I spent that first year learning how to be alone, how to sleep in a half-empty bed, how to stop setting the table for two. Then, suddenly, David was calling more often, asking about the house, about my finances, about my plans for the future. His voice would take on that concerned tone, the one people use when they're trying to sound caring while getting what they want. "Mom, you can't keep living alone in that big old house," he'd say. "Think about downsizing." I wasn't born yesterday. I've lived long enough to recognize concern wrapped in convenience. But what could I do? He was my son, my only child. You always want to believe the best about your children. Maybe they really were worried. Maybe I was being paranoid, stubborn, the difficult old woman no one wants to become. 2 months ago, I noticed something strange. Papers in my home office, slightly rearranged. My will moved from where I always kept it, tucked behind the family photo albums. Then Amanda started asking oddly specific questions about my mortgage. Is it paid off completely? Do you have the deed? Always with that syrupy smile that never quite reached her eyes. I began to pay closer attention. When they visited over Memorial Day weekend, I noticed how their conversations would stop abruptly when I entered a room. How David would change the subject when I mentioned planning to replace the roof. How Amanda took photos of my jewelry box when she thought I wasn't looking. One night I overheard them on the back porch. I'd gone to bed early, but came down for my heart medication. Their voices drifted in through the kitchen window, which I'd left cracked open. "Once we get her to sign," Amanda was saying, "we can list it immediately. The market in this neighborhood is hot right now." David's voice was lower, but just as clear in the still night air. "I know a guy who can make the paperwork look routine. She trusts me. She'll sign." My hands shook as I stood in the darkened kitchen. The teacup I was holding clattered against the counter. Outside, they fell silent. "Mom?" David called. "That you?" I didn't answer. Couldn't answer. My throat had closed up, my chest tight with betrayal. I slipped back upstairs, my medication forgotten, my mind racing. That's when I knew I needed help. And evidence. A recording device. In a brooch? I asked Martha, my next-door neighbor for 20 years and retired police detective. "Won't that be obvious?" She laughed, the deep chuckle that always reminded me of James. "Technology isn't just for the young, Betty. This looks like a regular vintage brooch, but it's got a high-quality microphone and camera. My department used similar ones for undercover work." We sat at her kitchen table, the late afternoon sun casting long shadows across her floor. Her cat, Sherlock, wound between my ankles as if sensing my distress. Martha had moved in next door right after her divorce, back when being a female detective was still a rarity. We'd bonded over fence-line conversations and emergency cups of sugar. When James got sick, she'd brought over casseroles and sat with me during chemo sessions. She was family in all the ways that mattered. "Are you sure about this?" Martha asked, her expression serious now. "These are serious allegations against your own son." I nodded, the weight of my decision heavy on my shoulders. I need to know the truth, and if what I suspect is happening, I need proof. "What if you're wrong?" she asked gently. "What if they really are just concerned about you?" The question had haunted me for weeks. Then I'll apologize, and we'll move forward. But Martha, my voice caught. I heard them, planning to sell my house out from under me. Martha reached across the table and squeezed my hand. I'll help you set it up. And I've called my friend Edward, who's still practicing law. He specializes in elder law and estate planning. He can meet us tomorrow. That night, I barely slept. I kept seeing David as a little boy, gap-toothed and earnest, asking me to trust him on his new bicycle without training wheels. I saw him as a teenager, sullen but sweet, helping James build the garden trellis for my birthday. I saw him at his college graduation, tall and proud, the first Williams to earn a degree. When had my son become a stranger? Or had he always been capable of this, and I just couldn't see it? The next day, Edward Pierce arrived at Martha's house in a tweed suit that had seen better days, but with sharp eyes that missed nothing. He was older than me, with a stooped posture and liver-spotted hands that belied the quickness of his mind. As I explained my suspicions, he took careful notes in a leather-bound notebook, occasionally asking clarifying questions. "What did the documents look like?" he asked. "Did you get a chance to read any of them?" "No," I admitted, "but they mentioned something about a transfer of property to protect me." Edward nodded grimly. "Unfortunately, Mrs. Williams, what you're describing is not uncommon. Elder financial abuse is often perpetrated by family members. The good news is that with proper evidence, it can be stopped." He explained how to use the recording device legally, what to say, what not to say, how to make sure any evidence gathered would be admissible if needed. The conversation felt surreal. Was I really plotting to gather evidence against my own son? "Don't sign anything," he emphasized, tapping the table with one gnarled finger. "No matter what, tell them you need time to think, that you want to have someone look it over." "What if they pressure me?" I asked, thinking of David's persuasive skills, honed by years in real estate. "Stall," Edward advised. "Say you're tired, that your arthritis is acting up. Whatever buys you time. Remember, it's your house. You have all the power here, not them." That night, I practiced with the brooch until I could turn it on and off without looking. Martha had pinned it to my favorite blue cardigan, the one with the pearl buttons that David always complimented. The weight of it felt strange against my chest, a physical reminder of my suspicions. "Just act natural," Martha advised as she adjusted the angle. "Let them do the talking. The more they say, the more evidence we'll have." I nodded, my mouth dry. What if I'm wrong? What if they really are just concerned about me? Martha's expression softened. "Then you'll know that too. Either way, you deserve the truth." I called David that evening, rehearsing what I would say. My voice shook slightly as he answered. "I've been thinking about what you said," I told him, "about the house being too much for me. Maybe you're right. Could you and Amanda come over this weekend to discuss options?" His voice brightened immediately. "That's great news, Mom. Actually, I have some papers already drawn up that might help. We'll be there Saturday morning." Already drawn up? The confirmation sent a chill through me. I hung up, my heart pounding. The trap was set. But who was trapping whom? Saturday morning arrived with a gentle rain that matched my mood. I barely slept, rehearsing what to say, how to act. The brooch was pinned to my cardigan, ready to record. Martha was on standby next door, ready to come over if I texted her the agreed signal. "Could you bring over some sugar?" I made coffee, arranged cookies on a plate, the chocolate chip ones David had loved since childhood. My hands trembled slightly as I moved around the kitchen. Was I overreacting? Was this elaborate setup really necessary? Then I remembered the cold calculation in Amanda's voice as she discussed selling my home, and my resolve hardened. The doorbell rang at precisely 10 a.m. David and Amanda stood on my porch, both dressed smartly as if for a business meeting rather than a family visit. David kissed my cheek. Amanda hugged me with one arm, her designer perfume lingering in the air like a claim being staked. "You look tired, Mom," David said as they settled in my living room, his eyes scanning my face with what seemed like genuine concern. "Everything okay?" "Just the usual aches and pains of getting older," I replied with a smile. "Nothing to worry about." "You should try that new arthritis cream I told you about," Amanda suggested, setting her sleek leather handbag beside her. "Works wonders for my mother." As I poured coffee, Amanda's eyes scanned the room, lingering on the antique grandfather clock, the silver picture frames, the hand-carved bookshelf James had made, appraising, calculating. I'd seen that look before, at estate sales and auctions, the look of someone mentally assigning price tags to pieces of other people's lives. David placed a leather portfolio on the coffee table. I brought those documents I mentioned, really straightforward stuff. Just a transfer of property that would make things easier for everyone. I touched my brooch as if adjusting it, making sure it was recording. Transfer of property? I asked, feigning confusion. The house, Mom, he said slowly, as if explaining to a child. It would put the house in our names while giving you lifetime rights to live here. It protects the asset and simplifies things. Amanda nodded eagerly. It's what all the financial advisors recommend for people in your situation. Senior citizens living alone, Amanda clarified, that syrupy smile fixed in place. It's for asset protection, in case you ever need long-term care or anything like that. Medicaid has that 5-year look-back period, you know. I didn't know actually, but I nodded as if I did. Edward had warned me they might use terms like this to confuse me. David opened the portfolio, spreading several papers across my coffee table. These just need your signature, and we'll handle everything else. I picked up the top document, pretending to read it carefully. The language was dense with legal terms, but Edward had prepared me for what to look for. There it was, a quitclaim deed that would transfer full ownership to David and Amanda immediately. No lifetime estate, no protections for me, just a complete signing away of the home I'd spent 40 years making mine. This seems very final, I said, letting a tremble enter my voice. It's standard, Mom, David assured me. Trust me, I deal with real estate all the time. It's really the best way to protect your assets. And what happens after I sign these? I asked. Unless, Amanda added, her voice lilting upward, you decide you want something smaller. That condo complex near us in Arizona is really wonderful. Lots of activities for seniors. And you'd be close to us and the kids. The pen hovered over the document, my son's impatient breath on my neck. Just sign it, Mom. It's for your own good, he said. What he didn't know was that the brooch on my cardigan had been recording everything for the past 30 minutes. And this wasn't the first time. I set the pen down. I think I'd like someone else to look these over first. David's expression hardened slightly. Who? These are straightforward documents, Mom. No need to waste money on lawyers. Maybe Mrs. Abernathy next door, I suggested innocently. She used to work as a legal secretary. Martha Abernathy is a busybody, Amanda said sharply. This is family business. I just mean, these matters should stay private, she amended. Between family. Or we could call Uncle Robert, I added, mentioning my late husband's brother who they'd always been intimidated by. Robert was a retired judge with a booming voice and zero tolerance for nonsense. David sighed dramatically. Mom, we're trying to help you. Why are you making this difficult? Is it difficult to let me have someone else look at papers I'm about to sign? I asked, my voice stronger now. Papers that will change ownership of my home? It's not changing ownership, it's protecting, David began. We won't be in town long, Amanda interrupted, checking her watch with exaggerated impatience. We have flights back tomorrow evening. And this can't wait? I asked. The market's hot right now, Amanda said, then caught herself. I mean, it's good to get these protections in place while you're still, while I'm still what, Amanda? Capable of making decisions, she finished smoothly. I nodded slowly. Then I guess we'll have to do this another time. When I can have someone review these with me. The atmosphere in the room changed instantly. David's concerned son, Ax, dropped away like a mask. For God's sake, Mom, he snapped. You're being ridiculous. These papers protect you. How exactly? I asked. By taking my house? We're not taking anything. We're securing it for the family. Amanda leaned forward, her voice taking on a patronizing tone. Betty, with all due respect, you're getting older. This house is too much for you. The stairs, the maintenance, the equity, I added quietly. They both stared at me. I heard you, I said. On the back porch 2 months ago, talking about listing my house. The market being hot right now. David's face flushed. You misunderstood. Did I? Because these papers, I tapped them with one finger, don't give me lifetime rights to stay here. They transfer complete ownership to you. No protections for me at all. Mom, you're confused. I'm not confused, David. I'm disappointed. I reached up and unpinned my brooch, setting it on the table between us. Do you know what this is? They stared at it blankly. It's a recording device, Everything you've said since you arrived has been documented, including your admission that these papers are a property transfer, not the asset protection you claimed. The color drained from Amanda's face. David's expression cycled through shock, anger, and finally calculation. You're recording us, that's illegal, Amanda sputtered. Not in this state, with one-party consent, I replied calmly, thanking Edward silently for preparing me, and certainly not in my own home when I suspect fraud. I've been protecting myself, I corrected him. After I overheard you planning to sell my house out from under me. You don't understand the market, David said, his voice rising. You're sitting on a gold mine here, and you're too stubborn to see it. David, Amanda warned, placing a hand on his arm. He shrugged her off. No, she needs to hear this. Mom, you're 78 years old. What are you going to do with this house? Let it fall apart around you? At least we could make sure it goes to good use. Good use, I repeated. Like padding your bank account? Like securing our children's future, he shot back. Your grandchildren's future. Isn't that what you and Dad always wanted? For the family to be taken care of? David leaned back, crossing his arms. So what now, Mom? You going to call the police on your own son? That depends on you, I said. I'd rather not. Everything okay, Betty? She asked, though her eyes were fixed on David and Amanda. Perfect timing, I said. David and Amanda, this is Edward Pierce. He's an elder law attorney, and you know Martha. David had risen to his feet, his face a storm cloud. What is this, an ambush? No, I said. It's a rescue. Edward sat at my dining room table, reviewing the documents David had brought while Martha made tea in the kitchen. David and Amanda sat stiffly on the couch, like schoolchildren caught in mischief. The atmosphere was thick with tension and unspoken accusations. I watched my son from across the room, the tight set of his jaw, the way his fingers drummed against his knee, a nervous habit he'd had since childhood. I wondered if he felt any shame at all, if somewhere beneath the polished exterior of success and ambition, there was still the boy who would crawl into my lap during thunderstorms, seeking comfort. These documents, Edward said finally, closing the portfolio with a decisive snap, would indeed transfer complete ownership of the property to David and Amanda Williams, with no protections for Mrs. Williams, no life estate, no right to continue living here, nothing. It was just a draft, David muttered, not meeting anyone's eyes. We were going to discuss options. Edward raised an eyebrow. That's not what the recording indicates, Mr. Williams. You presented these for immediate signature, with assurances that they protected your mother while doing precisely the opposite. You don't understand, Amanda began. I understand perfectly, Edward interrupted. I've been practicing elder law for 40 years. This, he tapped the portfolio, is textbook elder financial abuse. Abuse? David's head snapped up. That's ridiculous. We're trying to help her. By taking her home? Martha asked dryly from the doorway, carrying a tray of teacups. Some help. This is none of your business, Amanda told her coldly. When it comes to my friend being taken advantage of, I make it my business, Martha replied, setting the tray down with a pointed clatter. I watched my son, my little boy who once made me Mother's Day cards with crayon hearts, who cried when his father taught him to ride a bicycle, who I'd sacrificed for and loved every day of his life. When had he changed? Or had I just not wanted to see it? Why, David? I asked quietly. We're not destitute. Your father left you well provided for. You have a successful career. He wouldn't meet my eyes, staring instead at his polished shoes. The housing market is about to explode in this area. With the new tech campus being built, property values could double in the next few years. So this was an investment opportunity. The words tasted bitter. And what about me? Where would I live after you sold my home? We'd have found you somewhere suitable, David said defensively. A nice retirement community, Amanda added. We researched several. With what money? Edward interjected. The proceeds from the sale would be legally theirs to use as they wished. There's nothing in these documents that earmarks any funds for Mrs. Williams' future housing or care. A heavy silence fell over the room. Martha returned with tea, setting it down with more force than necessary. She'd never been one to hide her feelings. Mrs. Williams, Edward said gently, you have several options here. We can file a police report for attempted fraud. We can seek a restraining order. Or, I prompted, or we can draw up a new agreement, one that actually does what they claimed this one would do, protects your interests while planning for the future. David looked up sharply. You'd still consider working with us? After this? Not with you, Edward clarified. With your mother, to ensure her wishes are respected and her assets protected from anyone who might try to take advantage. I looked at my son, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. What do you want, David? Really want? For the first time, uncertainty crossed his face. The polished veneer cracked, revealing something vulnerable beneath. I don't know anymore, he admitted. It started as just business, a good opportunity. Then it became, I don't know. Easy, I suggested. It became easy to tell yourselves you were helping me while helping yourselves. He nodded reluctantly. Did you ever stop to think about what I want? I asked. About my attachment to this house? The memories it holds? You can't live on memories, Mom, he said, but with less conviction now. No, but I can live in the home I built with your father. The home where I raised you. The home that still has your height marks on the kitchen doorframe. I saw him swallow hard at that. Amanda looked away, suddenly fascinated by her manicure. Here's what's going to happen, I said, surprising myself with how steady my voice was. Edward is going to draw up a proper estate plan for me. One that reflects my wishes, not yours. You and Amanda are going to return to Arizona and think about whether you want to have a relationship with me based on love, not real estate values. And the recording? Amanda asked tightly. Stays with me, I said, as insurance. David stood up, anger flashing in his eyes again. So that's it? You're threatening us? I'm setting boundaries, I corrected him. Something I should have done a long time ago. Come on, Amanda, he said, gathering his portfolio. We're leaving. Amanda hesitated, looking between David and me. For a moment, I thought I saw something like shame cross her face. Then she collected her handbag and followed him to the door. David paused at the threshold, turning back. You're making a mistake, Mom. This house is too much for you. Maybe, I said, but it's my mistake to make. The door closed behind them with a finality that echoed in my chest. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath until Martha's hand settled on my shoulder. But as I watched my son's car pull away through the rain-streaked window, I wondered what I'd really won and what I'd lost. The weeks after David and Amanda left were some of the hardest of my life. Harder in some ways than when James died. Grief for a spouse is expected, natural. Grief for a relationship with your child while they're still living is a strange, hollow thing. I'd expected anger, perhaps even threats. Instead, there had been silence, complete radio silence. No calls on Sunday, no emails, no messages asking about the grandchildren's birthdays, just a void where my family used to be. Edward helped me create a proper estate plan, one that provided for my needs first, with clear provisions for what would happen to the house after I was gone. He also introduced me to a financial advisor who specialized in helping seniors, someone who didn't see my age as a liability, but as a lifetime of experience. You'll need to update this every few years, Edward explained, handing me the binder of documents. But this protects you and ensures your wishes are honored. What about David? I asked. Should I leave him anything? Edward's kind eyes held no judgment. That's entirely up to you, Betty. Some parents in your situation choose to disinherit completely. Others still leave something. You have time to decide. 2 weeks turned into a month. I threw myself into projects around the house, tasks I'd been putting off. I painted the guest bedroom myself, though it took me 3 times as long as it would have taken James. I planted new rose bushes in the garden. I had the roof repaired. Each night I'd sit on the back porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, remembering how David used to chase fireflies in the yard, the jar clutched in his small hands glowing with each new capture. Then, finally, an email, short, terse. Mom, we need to talk. Can I call you? David. I stared at those words for a long time before replying, yes, Sunday at 2. His voice sounded tired, subdued. Hi, Mom. How are you? I'm well, I said, unsure how to navigate this new terrain between us. The roses are blooming. Dad's roses? A note of something, nostalgia, regret, colored his tone. Yes. And some new ones I planted. A pause. Mom, I'm sorry. 3 simple words. Not enough, not by a long shot, but a start. For what exactly? I asked, not willing to make this easy for him. He sighed heavily. For treating you like an asset instead of my mother. For lying about those papers. For all of it. What changed, I asked. Honestly? After we left, Amanda and I had the biggest fight of our marriage, she said. He hesitated. She said I'd become exactly the kind of predatory realtor we used to complain about. And she was right. I hadn't expected that from Amanda. Perhaps I'd misjudged her. I've been doing a lot of thinking, David continued. About what kind of example I'm setting for my kids. About what Dad would say if he could see what I tried to do. He'd be disappointed, I said softly. He'd be furious, David corrected. And he'd be right. Another long pause. I don't expect you to forgive me right away, maybe ever, but I want to try to make things right. Somehow. 3 months later, I sat on my back porch with Martha, watching those same roses bloom in full glory, filling the air with their sweet fragrance. Heard from David? She asked, sipping her iced tea. I nodded. He called yesterday. They're coming for Thanksgiving. Just the two of them? No, the kids too. First time in years. Martha raised her eyebrows. You're sure about this? No, I admitted, but I'm willing to try. It hadn't been an easy road back. There had been more difficult conversations, more apologies. David had offered to pay for the roof repairs, which I'd declined, but he'd sent birthday cards to me from the grandchildren, handmade ones, with crayon hearts, that reminded me so much of his childhood cards that I'd cried when I opened them. Edward had helped me revise my estate plan again, still protecting me, but with provisions for David and his children that reflected my love for them, complicated though it was. The irony, I told Martha, is that I was already planning to leave the house to David eventually, just not on anyone's timeline but my own. Have you told him that? I shook my head. Not yet. Some trusts need to be rebuilt first. The doorbell rang, and Martha smiled. That'll be the others. Inside, my living room had been transformed. Where David and Amanda had once spread their deceptive papers, now sat a circle of chairs, 6 women from the neighborhood, all over 70, all living alone, all with stories of children or relatives who had tried to help in ways that helped themselves more. We'd started meeting weekly after my confrontation with David. At first just to share experiences and warnings, but it had evolved into something more. With Edward's guidance, we were creating resources for other seniors, warning signs to watch for, legal protections to put in place, technology tips for documenting suspicious behavior. Ladies, Edward greeted us, setting his briefcase on the coffee table. I've got good news. The community center has agreed to host our first workshop next month. Protecting your legacy. Know your rights as a senior citizen. A cheer went up from the group. Meredith, a former school principal, had already designed flyers. Helen, who'd worked in publishing, had contacts at the local newspaper for publicity. Betty's going to tell her story, Edward continued, nodding toward me. If she's comfortable with that. All eyes turned to me. Was I ready to share this painful, private experience? To admit how my own son had tried to take advantage of me? Yes, I said, surprising myself. If it helps even one person avoid what I went through, it's worth it. Eleanor, a retired nurse with silver hair and sharp eyes, reached over to squeeze my hand. It's brave, what you did. Standing up to your son like that. Not everyone would have the courage. I wasn't sure it was courage so much as desperation. But I nodded, accepting her words. As I looked around at these strong, vibrant women, none of whom were willing to be sidelined or taken advantage of, I felt a surge of gratitude. David's betrayal had been painful, but it had also connected me to this community, this purpose. The brooch that had captured his deception now sat in my jewelry box, a reminder that trust should be earned, not assumed, but also a reminder that it's never too late to stand up for yourself, to create boundaries, to demand respect. Later, after everyone had left, I sat alone in my garden as darkness fell. I thought about the decades that had passed in this house, the birthday parties, the Christmas mornings, the quiet evenings with James, but I also thought about the future stretching before me. Different than I'd imagined, but still mine to shape. My phone buzzed with a text from David. Booked our flights for Thanksgiving. Kids excited to see Grandma. And it would be. Because this was still my house, my life, my choice. The pen that had hovered over those documents now wrote a different story. One where an old dog could indeed learn new tricks, where betrayal could lead to empowerment, and where a mother's love could be both boundless and bounded. Because sometimes the greatest revenge isn't in getting even, It's in standing your ground and refusing to be moved. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, it's in finding a way back to the love that got lost along the way. The workshop at the community center was scheduled for the following month. I spent weeks preparing my speech, finding the right words to describe what had happened without demonizing David. It was a delicate balance, warning others while still leaving room for reconciliation in my own family. The night before the workshop, I couldn't sleep. I wandered through the house in my robe and slippers, touching the familiar walls, the door frames, the windowsills. This house that had almost been taken from me now felt more precious than ever. In the kitchen, I traced my fingers over the marks on the doorframe. David at 5, at 10, at 15, his growth mapped in pencil lines and dates. James had insisted on measuring him on every birthday, even when teenage David had rolled his eyes and protested. Someday, James had said, you'll want to remember how you grew. How right he had been, though not in the way he'd meant. The workshop was filled beyond capacity. Women and men in their 60s, 70s, 80s, all with stories, all with concerns. Edward spoke first, outlining the legal aspects, the warning signs, the protections available. Then it was my turn. I approached the podium, my notes clutched in slightly trembling hands, looking out at the sea of faces, some anxious, some determined, all attentive. I set the notes aside. My name is Betty Williams, I began. I'm 78 years old, and last year my son tried to take my house. The room was silent as I told my story. The gradual shift in David's behavior after James died, the overheard conversation, the deceptive documents. I spoke about the recording device, the confrontation, the painful aftermath, and then the slow, tentative steps toward reconciliation. The hardest part, I told them, wasn't standing up to my son. It was dealing with the aftermath, the fear that I'd lost him forever, that protecting myself meant destroying our relationship. An elderly man in the front row nodded, wiping a tear from his weathered cheek. But what I've learned, I continued, is that true relationships, true love, can survive honesty. Sometimes they even need it to grow stronger. After the presentation, a line of people waited to speak with me. Women who'd had similar experiences with children or nephews or neighbors, men who worried about losing control of their finances to well-meaning but overbearing relatives. Each had a story, a fear, a question. One woman, bent with osteoporosis but with clear, bright eyes, gripped my hand. My daughter's been pressuring me to move in with her, she confided. Says it's for my safety, but I've seen how she looks at my bank statements when she thinks I'm not watching. I gave her Edward's card. Trust your instincts, I told her, and get some legal advice before you agree to anything. By the time I got home, I was exhausted but fulfilled. This new purpose, helping others avoid what I'd nearly fallen victim to, gave meaning to my experience. It transformed my private pain into public good. As I unlocked my front door, my phone rang. David, I just wanted to check in, he said. How did your presentation go? I paused, surprised. How did you know about that? Martha told me, he admitted. We've been talking. She's been keeping an eye on me, making sure my intentions stay pure. I couldn't help but smile at the thought of fierce Martha grilling my son regularly. It went well, I told him. A lot of people in similar situations. I'm sorry you were in that situation at all, he said quietly. That I put you there. A beat of silence stretched between us. Dad would be proud of you, he added. Standing up for yourself, helping others. The words touched something deep in my heart. He'd be proud of you too, for finding your way back. I'm trying, he said. See you at Thanksgiving? I'll be here, I replied. This is my home, after all. Yes, he agreed. It is. When Thanksgiving arrived, I felt a nervous flutter as I prepared the house. I'd insisted on hosting, despite David's offers to have me fly to Arizona instead. This needed to happen here, in the home that had almost come between us. Martha helped me prepare, eyeing the turkey critically as I basted it. You sure about this? She asked for the 10th time. I can stay if you want backup. I shook my head. This is family business, I said, echoing Amanda's words from that confrontation, but with a smile. I need to do this alone. When the doorbell rang, I smoothed my apron and took a deep breath. Opening the door revealed David, Amanda, and their children. Emily, 12, and Jason, 9. They stood awkwardly on the porch, arms full of bags and dishes. We brought side dishes, Amanda said, offering a casserole like a peace offering. And wine. Come in, I said, stepping aside. Everything's almost ready. The children broke the ice, as children often do. Emily immediately wanted to see her father's old room, and Jason was fascinated by the height marks on the kitchen doorframe. That's Daddy? He asked incredulously, pointing to a mark labeled David, age 9. That's him, I confirmed. You're taller than he was at your age. Jason beamed with pride. As we settled around the dining table, the same table where Edward had reviewed those deceptive documents, I felt a moment of déjà vu. But this time, the papers spread across the table were children's drawings, not legal forms. David carved the turkey, his hands steady. Mom, would you like to say grace? He asked. I nodded, taking his hand on one side and Amanda's on the other. The circle completed as the children took their parents' hands. We give thanks for this food, I began, the traditional words my family had always used. For health and strength, for love and friends, for everything that goodness sends. Amen. And we give special thanks, David added, unexpectedly, for second chances, for forgiveness, for the wisdom to recognize our mistakes and the courage to make amends. His eyes met mine across the table, filled with a humility I'd never seen there before. Amen to that, I whispered. Later, as the children played in the living room and Amanda helped wash dishes, an olive branch I accepted graciously, David pulled me aside. I have something for you, he said, handing me a thick envelope. Inside was a legal document, a revocation of the previous papers he'd tried to have me sign, along with a signed statement acknowledging that the house was mine alone to control. You didn't need to do this, I said. Edward already took care of everything. I know, he replied, but I wanted to make it official, from my side, to give you peace of mind. I studied my son's face, seeing both the man he'd become and the boy he'd been. There was genuine remorse there, and something else, a newfound respect. I've also been thinking, he continued, about moving back east, being closer to you. Emily and Jason hardly know their grandmother, and that's my fault. What about your business in Arizona? I asked. He shrugged. There's real estate everywhere, and some things are more important than hot markets. I touched his cheek, the way I used to when he was small. Don't make any hasty decisions. We have time now. That night, after they'd left with promises to return for Christmas, I sat on the back porch despite the November chill. The stars were particularly bright, as if James was up there making sure I could see them clearly. We did good with him, I whispered to the night sky. He found his way back. The brooch still sat in my jewelry box, a reminder of darker days, but now it symbolized something different. Not just protection, but transformation. The small device had captured evidence of betrayal, but also set in motion a journey toward healing. My story. Our story wasn't over. There would be more challenges, more difficult conversations, more boundaries to maintain. Trust, once broken, takes time to rebuild. But we had made a start. As winter turned to spring, my senior advocacy group continued to grow. We published a pamphlet, Protecting Your Legacy, that was distributed at community centers and retirement homes throughout the county. Edward conducted monthly legal clinics, offering free advice to seniors concerned about their rights. David and Amanda did move back east, though not immediately. They bought a house 20 minutes away, close enough for regular visits, far enough to maintain healthy boundaries. Emily began stopping by after school sometimes, fascinated by my collection of vintage jewelry. I taught her to bake pies in the same kitchen where I'd taught her father to make cookies. One afternoon, as we crimped the edges of a cherry pie crust, Emily asked, "Grandma, did you and Dad really have a big fight about the house?" I paused, flour dusting my hands. "We had a disagreement," I said carefully, "about what was best for me. Mom says Dad tried to take your house," she persisted, with the directness only preteens can muster. "It was more complicated than that," I replied. "Sometimes people make mistakes because they think they know what's best for others. Like when Mom and Dad say, 'I can't have a phone yet.'" I smiled. Not quite the same thing. But yes, sometimes adults think they know best, even when they're wrong. "Dad says you taught him an important lesson," Emily continued, focusing intently on the crust. "About respecting other people's choices." "I hope I did," I said softly. "I'm glad you kept your house," she declared. "I like visiting here. It feels like history." "That's exactly what it is," I told her. Your history. Your father's history. Your grandmother and grandfather's history. And as we slid the pie into the oven, I felt James's presence all around us. In the kitchen we'd remodeled together, in the garden visible through the window, in the granddaughter with his same determined chin. The house had weathered storms, both literal and figurative. It had almost been lost, then found again, like the family that inhabited it. The pen that had hovered over those documents had never signed away my home. Instead, it had begun writing a new chapter, one where an old dog learned new tricks, where betrayal led to empowerment, and where a mother's love proved both boundless and bounded. As the sweet scent of cherry pie filled the kitchen, the same scent that had wafted through this house for 4 decades of birthdays and holidays and ordinary Tuesdays, I knew with certainty that I was exactly where I belonged. In my home. On my terms. Surrounded by the love that had found its way back. Because sometimes the greatest victory isn't in winning the battle, it's in healing the wounds that made the battle necessary in the first place. And sometimes the most powerful thing you can do is simply refuse to be moved.